Once again, the teachings of the Catholic Church are confirmed by science, this time around dating, waiting until marriage, and cohabitation, whether or not you should do that. The Church's teachings on this have been shown that if you follow the Church's teachings on these subjects, you are way more likely to have a happier life and be more satisfied with your marriage later on in your adulthood. In this video, we're going to look through half a dozen studies that confirm if you follow the Church's teachings on waiting until marriage, not cohabitating before marriage, not having many partners before you find your eventual spouse, you are way more likely to be happy than if you do the opposite, and it's not even close. Now, why is this important? It's important because, for one, it doesn't by itself prove that Catholicism is true, but it at least shows that there's strong evidence in that direction. And it definitely shows the superiority of Catholic teaching over the common teaching that we hear in our culture nowadays. Because what we hear nowadays is you should have many partners before you're married. You should figure out who you're compatible with in the bedroom. You should live together before marriage because you got to figure out if you can live together, if you get along before you get married. You got to figure that out first. We hear all of these things, and the promise is if you follow these pieces of advice, you are more likely to have a happy marriage. You're more likely to find out who you're compatible with, and then you're going to marry that person. You're going to be happier in the long run. So if the evidence shows the opposite, then it shows at the very least that the Catholic teaching on these matters is superior to the secular teaching, you might say. So I just want to make that clear. Just because the Catholic Church is right about this doesn't by itself mean that Catholicism is true. So you don't have to become a Catholic if you agree with everything that I say in this video, but it at least shows that the Catholic teaching on this matter is superior to the opposite. Another thing I want to make clear is that this is not meant to pass judgment on anybody. So if you've done the things that the Catholic Church teaches you should not do, it's not to say that you're just a horrible person and there's no hope for you and just go away. We don't want any part of you. Actually, the church is very open to people who have done these things before because we've all done horrible things before. We've all sinned. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. And the church offers the sacraments so that we can return to a proper relationship with God. There's nobody for whom there is no hope. There's nobody for whom that is closed off. In fact, the church's primary purpose is to find people who are outside of relationship with God, who are, living a lifestyle contrary to God, and to bring them in full union with God. So if you're somebody who's done these before, there's no judgment. The purpose of this video is rather to show that what the church teaches on these matters is actually true. And when you apply these teachings to your life, you're going to live a better life than if you don't. And so if you're somebody who is confused about what the church teaches or why she teaches these things, or you know somebody who you want to be able to explain these things to, why is the church, so uptight about sex or something, then this video is for you. Okay, so with all of that explained, let's get right into it. So a lot of people think that the church is anti-sex, and they think that, Catholics are repressed and they're encouraged to just never enjoy anything in that realm of the world. That could not be further from the truth. What the Catholic Church is against is the abuse of sex or misuse of sex. So think of it like this. Food is good. Everybody agrees that food is good. But if you eat 4 cheeseburgers per day, that's not good. So it's not the food that's the problem. It's the misuse or abuse of the food that turns a good thing into a harmful thing. Not because the good thing is bad, but because the good thing is being misused for bad. So with that in mind, what is the proper use of sex according to the church? Well, according to the church, the purpose of sex is procreation, the creation of new life, and also encouraging unity between the spouses. So it is meant to be done in a marriage between a man and a woman for the purpose of at least being open to the creation of new life, and also for the encouragement of the unity between the partners. So again, its two purposes are for the creation of new life, or at least being open to the creation of new life, and for encouraging the unity between the two spouses. And so any use of this gift from God that is closed off to new life, or that is not for the purpose of further uniting a pair of spouses, is an abuse. It's wrong. It's objectively evil. And so we can get into contraception and things like that, but I'm going to do that in a different video. This is actually part of a larger series. So if this is something you're interested in, make sure to subscribe and go check out the Patreon as well, because that is where people will be getting these videos earlier than if you're just watching on YouTube. But there we go. In a nutshell, that is the purpose of sex according to the Catholic Church and according to the scriptures of the New Testament and Old Testament. If you want to learn more about this, there's a lot more detail you could get into with this, but I'm just trying to give an overview here, and then we're going to get to the scientific studies that confirm this. But if you want to learn more, you can look at Catechism paragraphs 2337 through 2350. Gives you a whole in-depth description of what sex is for and the various abuses of that and why those are wrong. But a lot of this can be summed up by Pope St. John Paul II, who famously did tons of work in this area. And he says, quote, "The opposite of love is not hate, but use." So if you're treating somebody as use for your personal satisfaction, for your temporary gain in some way, that is the opposite of love. And we do that when we treat, whether it's our spouse or somebody who we barely know or whatever, or somebody on a screen, as a vehicle, not for anything other than our personal use. That is contrary to their dignity, it's contrary to our dignity, and it is a grave, grave misuse of a gift from God. Okay, so now we know what the church teaches in regards to sex before marriage and cohabitation and things like that. Now let's look at what are these studies that show that this is actually a better way to live and it's going to lead to more happiness than if you live by the opposite. So, one article that I have here pulled up is titled, "What's the Plan? Cohabitation, Engagement, and Divorce." And they start off by saying 50 to 65% of Americans believe that living together before marriage will improve their odds of relationship success. This is what we're always told, right? If you live together before marriage, then you're going to know, are you compatible, or are you going to argue all the time, or do you have a compatible routine? Can you handle the little conflicts that come with day to day life, like asking each other to wash the dishes or something like that? However, while that might sound intuitive, and while most people might believe that, the studies tend to show the exact opposite is true. So it says here that specifically 34% of marriages ended among those who cohabitated before being engaged, compared to 23% of marriages for those who live together only after being either married or engaged to be married. So this is showing that there is a significantly higher risk of divorce if you live together before being engaged than if you were to live together after being engaged or married. So you might say, well, what if I know I'm going to marry this person anyways? Shouldn't I just move in with them because I know this is going to work out? And the problem with that is that, as certain as you might feel, that might not happen. And if you're not on the same page on whether you want to get engaged, married, and you haven't talked about that, it's probably definitely not a good time to move in together. Even if you are engaged, I've seen couples who are engaged who were living together, who had a house together, had a wonderful life, were engaged to be married, and the engagement broke. It happens. Unfortunately, it does happen. And so if you're just betting on, well, we're going to get married, you don't know that for sure, even as certain as you might feel. And if it doesn't work out, then you're creating even more problems for yourself, as we're about to look at in other studies. So, for example, we've all heard that it's good to have many bedroom partners, to put it in a family friendly way, so that you can understand what you like, you can find somebody who you're compatible with, and things like that. But the studies actually show the opposite again. So here is another study titled "Re-examining the Link Between Premarital Sex and Divorce." And they acknowledge in the very first sentence that we all know premarital sex predicts divorce, but we don't know why. So this study is all about, they're already assuming that premarital sex predicts divorce, but they're trying to figure out why. But in the end of the abstract here, and I'm going to link to all of these studies in the description, by the way. So if you're interested in looking more in depth into any of these, feel free to go in the description and check those out. Comment below if I forget, because sometimes that happens. So let me know if I forgot to include the links. But they say here, compared to people with no premarital partners other than eventual spouses, those with 9 or more partners exhibit the highest divorce risk, followed by those with 1 to 8 partners. There is no evidence of gender differences. So whether you're a man or a woman, having many sexual partners before marriage is going to cause a problem. You're going to be more likely to get divorced. So this whole idea that we should be with as many people as possible, get it out of your system, go out there and just have fun, and then get married and settle down with a woman, or with a man if you are a woman. That is not shown by the science. In fact, the opposite is shown by the science. You are much more likely to have an unsuccessful marriage if you do these things. And so you might say, well, it does say here, other than eventual spouses. So if I'm only engaging in this with who I know to be my eventual spouse, then what's the problem? The study says that that's fine. Well, the problem with that is that you don't know if that is your eventual spouse. You don't know that. You might be engaged. You might be planning to get engaged. But the fact is, you are not married yet. And so that is not solidified yet. You just don't know. Like I said, I've known people who lived together, bought a house together, were engaged to get married, separated. And so if you are doing this and you're engaged to this person, or you are planning to be engaged to this person, and then things don't work out, you've just set yourself up to be more likely to have a divorce in your future marriage. And so you're just compounding the risk that you're going to one day end up in an unsuccessful and unhappy marriage and then get divorced, which is not something that I wish on anybody. And the reason that I wouldn't wish this on anybody, even my worst enemy, is that according to this study on personal well-being in the UK that was conducted from April 2022 to March 2023, Those who are divorced or unmarried are much less likely to have positive mental health outcomes and just general well being. So they say down here in the section on marital status and dependent children, quote, adults separated from their partner were more likely to report poor well being compared with those who were married or in a civil partnership. Those who were widowed, including surviving civil partners, are more likely to be clustered in older age groups. Therefore, well being ratings for this group may be affected by other factors. So they say of adults who were separated, over 1 in 10 reported low life satisfaction, significantly higher than adults who were divorced. So being separated and divorced means you are going to be much less satisfied with your life. Whereas if you're married, you only 3.3% of those who were married reported low life satisfaction. Likewise, if you're married, you are far less likely to report having anxiety, which is interesting. And here's a chart illustrating all of this. So there's low level of life satisfaction. Married have the lowest level of being unsatisfied. So you are far less likely to be unsatisfied with your life if you are married. And here's the same for level of worthwhile. So do you think living is worthwhile? Do you feel like your life is worthwhile? You are more likely to feel like your life is worthwhile if you are married. Same for happiness. If you are married, you are less likely to report low levels of happiness. And this chart's kind of confusing because it's like, are married people reporting lower happiness? No, this is low level of happiness score. So if you're married, you are less likely to report low levels of happiness and anxiety. If you're married, you're less likely to be anxious. And you can see in all of these, the married, which is this light blue bar, are the least likely to have all of these negative mental health outcomes, which means that married people are more likely to have low anxiety. They're more likely to have higher levels of happiness. They're more likely to feel that their life is worthwhile, and they're more likely to feel that they're satisfied with their life. So it's good to be married. It's good for your mental health to be married. And if you're doing all of these things that the church says you should not do, which will lower your chances of having a successful marriage, then you are just setting yourself up for a life of less happiness. And this is probably most dramatically shown in this article here titled Marriage May Be a Key to Happiness. And funnily, the subtitle is A Longer Running US Survey Also Finds That Conservatives Are Happier Than Liberals. Probably a subject for a different video. But look at what they found here. They found that if you're married, this is how much happier you are than non-married people on average. So an analysis of a survey that asked Americans to what extent they were happy finds that married people were persistently 30 points happier than unmarried people, whose average scores hovered near 0. So they asked people on a scale of negative 100, meaning you're absolutely sad, to positive 100, meaning you're just overflowing with joy. How happy are you? Married people reported around 30 to 40, depending on the year. So around 30 to 40, and not married people reported around 0 to like 5, meaning they're not really happy, but they're not really sad. They're just kind of whatever, somewhere in between happy and sad. So it's good to be married. We're figuring that out. Taylor Swift in her recent um, album is getting criticized because she's talking about how happy she is now that she's getting married. And it just turns out that that just happens to be factually, statistically true, that you are going to be happier if you're married. And so when evaluating the teachings of the Catholic Church or any philosophical system for that matter, you should evaluate what are the long-term effects of following this philosophy in my life. So if I'm going to follow this set of rules or this set of principles, if I'm going to live by this, what are the likely outcomes for my life? Is it going to make my life better? Is it going to make my life worse? Now, in some cases, this can be misleading because you might think, well, I'm happier if I'm doing X, Y, or Z in the short term, but in the long term, maybe that pans out to be much worse for my long-term benefit or my long-term happiness. And we can also confuse what makes us happy in this life with like what is ultimately good, which isn't always true. Sometimes what makes you happier in this life is going to be worse for you in the next life. So we should think about that as well. But at the very least, showing that one philosophy produces happier long-term outcomes for your life should give it some credibility. It should make you think, all right, even if I don't accept that, Jesus Christ is God and he rose from the dead and all of these supernatural claims or metaphysical claims of Christianity, at least the ethical claims of it, if you live by it, is going to produce better outcomes for your life. So at least this should get you that far. So we've seen in this video that the best way to improve your happiness in this life is to get married And the best way to have a successful marriage is to follow the teachings of the Catholic Church around sexuality, which means not having sex before marriage, not cohabitating before marriage, not having multiple sexual partners before marriage. And even if you think, well, this is the person I'm going to be with for the rest of my life, that doesn't always pan out. And so you're taking the risk of ruining your chances at a successful marriage, or at least lessening your chances for a successful marriage later in life by risking engaging in these activities with somebody who you are not yet married to. So you might think you're going to get married, but if that doesn't work, then you've now just lowered your chances of having a successful marriage later on. So if you are somebody who is confused about what the church teaches, I hope this video has helped you. Or if you're somebody who needs to explain this to somebody else, maybe your children, maybe a loved one, maybe a friend, hopefully this video helps you out as well. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'll get to as many as I can. But if you want a higher chance of getting your question answered, and I can maybe even make an additional video for you specifically, go to the Patreon at patreon.com/sipswithsarah. Link is also in the description and in the pinned comment. I'm very responsive over there, and members are seeing these videos earlier. They're getting access to exclusive videos that will never be shown for the public, and they get more direct access to me, meaning they can ask me questions. I can even make specific videos for very specific questions that might not be relevant to most people on YouTube, but might be very helpful to you. So I'd be happy to do that for you. So go check that out, patreon.com/sipswithsarah, linked in the description and in the pinned comment. Great way to support the channel and make sure that we can keep making these videos, because hopefully I've been hearing that these are helpful for a lot of people. I enjoy doing this, and I feel that this is what God is calling me to do. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like this video at the very least and subscribe. It's absolutely free. There's a Discord in the description. Great community of Catholics over there. Anyways, with all of that said, until I see you next time, God bless and cheers.